Hello, and welcome to the Intuitive Ouija. Thanks for clicking on my story. Before we begin, drop your city or country in the comments. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from. It all started with a draft, not of air but of an idea, a stupid, late-night idea born from cheap wine, and the specific brand of boredom that only settles in when the rain drums a monotonous rhythm against the windows of an isolated old house like this one. A house I'd inherited from a great aunt I'd met exactly once. A house filled with the kind of heavy, dark furniture that seemed to absorb light and sound, leaving only a thick silence in its wake. My friends, Leo and Sarah, were there more out of pity than anything else, I think, helping me settle in, which really meant drinking the bottle of Cabernet I'd bought and trying to ignore the way the floorboards groaned underfoot like the bones of some sleeping giant. Leo, ever the pragmatic architect, kept pointing out the poor craftsmanship of the wainscoting, while Sarah, an artist with a fascination for the macabre, ran her fingers over the dust-shrouded portraits of my grim-faced ancestors, declaring the place deliciously atmospheric. The idea, of course, was Sarah's. She'd found it in the attic, tucked away in a steamer trunk that smelled of camphor and regret, a Ouija board, but not the mass-produced Parker Brothers version I'd played with as a kid. This one was ancient, the board itself made of a dark, heavily lacquered wood with the letters and numbers carved by hand, the curves of the O and S looking almost sinister in their unevenness, and the planchette. God, the planchette was the thing that should have stopped. Us cold, it was a shard of mirror, not glass but actual silver-backed mirror, the edges worn smooth by time, but still holding a dangerous, sharp look, set into a delicate, tarnished silver frame shaped like a teardrop. And when you held it, it was cold, a deep, penetrating cold that seemed to leach the warmth right from your fingertips. "We have to," Sarah said, her eyes gleaming in the candlelight we'd lit, because a storm had just knocked the power out, plunging the house into a flickering, medieval darkness that made the shadows in the corners writhe and dance. "It's too perfect. The power's out, it's raining. We're in a creepy old house. It's not even a choice, it's an obligation." Leo scoffed, his rational mind already building a wall against the absurdity. But I, fueled by 2 glasses of wine and a deep, unspoken loneliness that this big, empty house had carved out inside me, agreed. A part of me may be hoping, just for a second, that there was something more, something beyond the drywall and the tax forms and the crushing weight of a life that felt only half-lived. So we sat on the dusty Persian rug in the center of the living room, the board between us, our knees almost touching, and we placed our fingers lightly on the cold, mirrored surface of the planchette. Our faces reflected back at us in its small, distorted oval, 3 tiny, flame-lit portraits trapped in silver. The first few minutes were a joke, Leo obviously pushing, spelling out nonsense words that made Sarah giggle. But then a hush fell over us, a genuine stillness, and the planchette began to move, not with the jerky, uncertain motions of human agency, but with a smooth, deliberate glide that felt independent. It went to H, then E, then L, then L, then O. A simple, chilling greeting. My heart was a frantic bird against my ribs, but I told myself it was Sarah. She was always the dramatic one. She had to be the one guiding it, creating a story for us. We asked stupid questions. "Is anyone there?" "Yes." "What is your name?" Z. Z. I. E. L. The name meaning nothing to us, just a collection of letters that felt old and dusty on the tongue. It was during one of these questions, as the planchette slid from P to R, that I noticed it, a detail so small and subtle it barely registered at first, a flicker of wrongness in the corner of my eye. I was watching our 3 reflections in the mirror, the tiny versions of us huddled around this occult toy, and I saw my own reflected hand, the index finger resting on the planchette, but it was out of sync just by a fraction of a second. In the real world, I had just adjusted the pressure of my finger, a tiny unconscious movement, but in the mirror, the movement happened a heartbeat later, a lag so minimal I almost dismissed it as a trick of the flickering candlelight, a stutter in my own. Perception. I blinked, focused harder, and it happened again. Leo scratched his nose with his free hand, and in the reflection, The motion was delayed, the mirrored Leo moving a moment after the real one had finished, a ghost of an action trailing behind its source. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "See what?" Sarah asked, her eyes fixed on the board, enthralled. "In the mirror, the reflections, they're lagging." Leo snorted. "It's a piece of old mirror, Maya. The silvering is probably degraded. It's just a visual distortion. Don't be spooked by physics." His explanation was so logical, so comforting, that I clung to it, desperate for an anchor in this suddenly unsteady reality. And I forced myself to ignore the wrongness, to focus on the letters the planchette was now spelling out with increasing speed. L, M, O, S, T, T, I, M, E. A gust of wind howled outside, rattling the window panes, and one of the candles guttered, sending a long, dancing shadow across the ceiling that looked for all the world like a reaching arm. A sudden, primal fear seized me, a certainty that we had tapped into something we should not have, something that was now pressing against the fragile film of our world, and I yanked my hands away from the planchette, breaking the circle. "We have to stop. We have to say goodbye." Sarah protested, disappointed, but Leo, perhaps seeing the genuine terror on my face, agreed. We hurriedly placed our fingers back on the planchette, but it wouldn't move. It was stuck, as if held fast by an invisible force. "Goodbye. We have to say goodbye," I insisted, my voice rising in panic. We tried to push it, but it was like trying to move a boulder. After a few tense seconds, it suddenly slid, not to goodbye, but to N. O, before stopping dead again. Leo, ever the skeptic, grew impatient. "This is ridiculous. It's probably warped with sticking. It's late. We're tired. Let's just call it a night." And with that, he stood up, breaking the circle definitively. Sarah sighed, a little put out, but she too rose, stretching. I remained on the floor, staring at the board, at the mirrored planchette sitting defiantly on NO, a deep sense of violation washing over me, a feeling that we had opened a door and walked away without closing it, leaving it swinging in the wind of whatever lay beyond. The power came back on with a sudden, harsh buzz, the electric lights bleaching the room of its eerie charm, making everything seem ordinary and safe again, and the moment was broken. We laughed, a little shakily, blamed the wine, and went our separate ways to bed, the events of the evening already beginning to soften at the edges, morphing into a funny story we would tell later. It wasn't until the next morning, standing in the stark, white light of my bathroom, that the true horror began to dawn. I was brushing my teeth, my mind fuzzy with sleep, and I glanced up at the mirror above the sink. I froze, toothpaste foam dripping from my slack jaw. The reflection was wrong. It showed the bathroom perfectly, the white tiles, the shower curtain with its blue geometric pattern, the window with the morning light streaming in, but it did not show me. Where my body should have been, there was only empty space, a perfect, me-shaped void in the reflection of the room. I could feel the weight of my body, the cold tile under my feet, the taste of mint in my mouth, but the mirror showed nothing. I waved my hand, a frantic, stupid gesture, and the reflection of the room remained static, undisturbed. A cold, bottomless dread poured into me, filling me from the inside out. I stumbled back, crashing into the doorframe, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. I fumbled for my phone on the counter, my hands shaking so violently I could barely swipe it open. I turned on the front-facing camera, and again nothing, just the empty living room behind me captured on the screen. I held my hand in front of the lens, and the video feed showed my hand disappearing, erased from existence. This wasn't a problem with one mirror. This was a fundamental rupture in the fabric of my reality. I ran through the house, a silent scream building in my throat, checking every reflective surface I could find. The dark screen of the television, the glass front of the microwave, the window pane as I peered out at the driveway. In every one I was absent. I was a ghost in my own home, a presence that could not be recorded, could not be seen. And then I saw it. I was standing in the living room, hyperventilating, tears of pure terror streaming down my face, when my gaze fell upon the large, ornate mirror that hung over the fireplace, a family heirloom I'd always found slightly menacing. This time it showed me, but it wasn't a reflection. It was a window, and on the other side was me, the real me, or at least the me that should have been in this world. She was dressed exactly as I was, in my old t-shirt and sweatpants, but her face was a mask of utter panic and despair. She was pounding on the glass from the other side, her mouth wide open in a silent, screaming shriek that I could feel in the marrow of my bones. Her eyes were wild, desperate, pleading with me. She was trapped. I was the reflection now, the silent, unseen observer, and she was the prisoner. I stumbled backward, tripping over the rug and landing hard on the floor, my eyes never leaving the mirror. The other me saw me fall, and her pounding intensified, her silent screams becoming more frantic. Then, as I watched, a figure walked into the reflection behind her, a figure that moved with a calm, confident swagger that was utterly alien to me. It was me, another me. This one's face was serene, a small, cruel smile playing on its lips. It placed a hand on the trapped me's shoulder, and the screaming me flinched away, scrambling back from the mirror's surface, her eyes filled with a new, even more profound terror. The smiling me, the doppelganger, looked directly at me through the glass, its eyes meeting mine. It didn't pound or scream. It simply stared, its smile widening, and then it waved a slow, mocking gesture, before turning and leading my terrified counterpart away, out of the frame of the mirror, leaving me alone on the floor, staring into a reflection that now showed only my empty living room. That's when the phone started ringing. It was Leo. I scrambled to answer it, my voice a broken croak. "Leo, oh God, Leo, something's wrong, something's really wrong." "Maya," he interrupted, his voice sounding strange, cold, and distant. "I just got a weird call from you. You sounded off. You asked if we said goodbye properly last night. Then you hung up. Are you okay?" I hadn't called him. I hadn't called anyone. The thing that was now wearing my face, living my life, was starting its work. The next few days were a descent into a special kind of hell, a paranoid nightmare where I was a spectator to the erasure of my own existence. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, jumping at every sound, constantly checking mirrors and windows, only to be met with my own profound absence. I saw her, the other me, through windows sometimes, getting into my car, taking out my trash, a perfect imitation, but there was a subtle wrongness to her movements, an efficiency and a lack of the familiar hesitations that defined me. Friends would text me, asking about plans we'd made, plans I knew nothing about. I tried to call them, to warn them, but my number was now her number, and she answered once, her voice a perfect replica of mine, but laced with a condescending sweetness. "Oh, you're still there?" she had whispered before hanging up. I was being systematically replaced, my life usurped by this thing from the other side of the glass. I became a creature of the shadows in my own house, hiding when the mailman came, peeking through blinds, living on canned food and terror. I tried to research, to find some folklore, some explanation for what had happened, but it was useless. I was a ghost, a rumor, a forgotten echo. The final confrontation came a week later. I was huddled in the walk-in pantry, the only room in the house without a window, shivering despite the warmth, when I heard the front door open. I heard her humming, a tune I sometimes hummed when I was content, a sound that now felt like a violation. She was moving through the house, her footsteps light and sure. I held my breath, praying she wouldn't come into the kitchen. The pantry door swung open. The light from the kitchen flooded in, and there she stood, my doppelganger, wearing my favorite jeans and sweater, her hair styled the way I usually wear it. She looked better than me, healthier, more vibrant, more real. She smiled, not a smile of malice, but one of genuine, deep satisfaction. Her eyes, my eyes, scanned the pathetic sight of me curled up among the cans of soup and bags of rice. There was no hatred there, only a kind of pitying triumph. I tried to speak, to scream, to plead, but only a dry, rasping sound escaped my lips. She took a step forward, and I shrunk back against the shelves. She knelt down so that our faces were level, and she reached out, not to touch me, but to gently tap a fingernail against a small, decorative mirror that hung on the inside of the pantry door. A mirror I had forgotten was even there. In its tiny surface, I could see the reflection of the pantry, and in it, I saw her kneeling, and I saw myself, a pale, terrified, and fading thing cowering against the shelves. She leaned in close, her breath smelling of my toothpaste, and she spoke the words that have since become the soundtrack to my eternal nightmare. Her voice a perfect, loving copy of my own, filled with a warmth that made the horror infinitely worse. She smiled a radiant, grateful smile and said, "Thank you for the upgrade." Then she stood up, turned, and walked out, closing the pantry door and plunging me back into darkness. I don't know how long I've been in here. Time has lost all meaning. The house is silent now. Sometimes I hear the faint sound of the television or the phone ringing, the sounds of a life being lived. My life. I am a prisoner in this small, dark room, and I know, with a certainty that is colder than the mirrored Planchette ever was, that this is not a pantry anymore. It has become my side of the mirror, and soon, I fear, I will forget what the light feels like on my real skin, and the only thing left of me will be a silent, screaming face in a shard of glass, pounding on an invisible barrier for a freedom that was foolishly thrown away on a rainy night for a cheap thrill. I am the reflection now, and she is the truth, and the upgrade is complete. The silence after she left was the most profound sound I have ever heard, a thick, woolly quiet that seemed to absorb even the frantic thumping of my own heart. A silence that wasn't an absence of noise, but a presence of nothingness, and in the days or perhaps weeks that followed, time has become a slippery concept, measured only in the creeping gnaw of hunger and the parched, cracked feeling of my lips. I have come to understand the true geometry of my prison, that the pantry door is no longer made of wood but of an impenetrable, silent glass, a one-way mirror through which I can sometimes see glimpses of my former life being lived with a chilling perfection. I saw her, the other me, my upgrade as she so aptly put it, hosting a dinner party for Leo and Sarah, their laughter filtering through to me not as sound, but as a vibration in the floorboards. A cruel pantomime of joy I was forced to watch, my face pressed against the cold, invisible barrier, my breath fogging a circle that only I could see, my stomach clenching at the sight of a cheese board I could smell only in the ghost of my memory. I have tried everything to break this existential quarantine, pounding my fists against the door until my knuckles were raw and bloodied. But the blows made no sound, my hands leaving no mark, as if I am the one made of smoke and suggestion, and it is the world that has solidified into an unchangeable truth. My attempts to attract attention are futile. Once, Leo came looking for a bottle of wine, his face so close to the door I could see the stubble on his chin, and I screamed his name with every ounce of air left in my burning lungs, my voice a silent, ragged tear in the fabric of my being. But he simply smiled, called out, "Found it," to the thing wearing my skin, and walked away, never knowing I was inches from him, trapped in a pocket dimension of my own making. The worst moments are the nights, when the house is dark and she comes to stand before the pantry, not looking in, but admiring her own reflection in the glass that is my entire universe, and I am forced to watch her live in the skin I once thought was mine, to see the easy way she inhabits my gestures, the confidence with which she corrects a stray strand of hair, the ownership she exerts over a space I can no longer touch. I have begun to notice changes, subtle at first, then more pronounced. The reflection in the glass, her reflection, is starting to look better, as if the life she has stolen is agreeing with her, filling out the hollows I always had under my eyes, erasing the lines of anxiety that were my constant companions, while I can feel myself fading, becoming less substantial, my edges blurring, my memories of the outside world, the feel of rain, the taste of coffee, the weight of a book in my hands, becoming distant and dreamlike, abstract concepts that belong to someone else. I am being digested by this silence, assimilated into the nothingness, and I know with a terrifying certainty that when the process is complete, I will not die, I will simply cease to have ever been, my existence scrubbed from the record and replaced with her superior, polished version. Sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, I see a flicker in the large mirror over the fireplace across the living room, a frantic movement, and I know it is the first me, the one I saw screaming, the original occupant of this reflective hell. and our eyes meet for a fleeting second across the vast, uncrossable gulf of the mirrored world. Two ghosts of the same person sharing a silent scream of understanding before she is dragged back into the depths by shadows I cannot see. This is the eternal consequence, a Russian doll of imprisonment, each version trapped behind the one that replaced it. My only sustenance is despair, my only companion the cold, smooth surface of the mirrored planchette, which I found tucked away on a shelf behind the cans, its surface now showing not a reflection of this room, but a swirling silver mist, a window to the void that birthed this horror, and I find myself drawn to its coldness, tracing the worn silver frame with a finger that feels less real each day, wondering if Azazel is in there, watching his handiwork, or if he too was once replaced another. Upgrade in an infinite, silent chain of stolen lives. The last thing I saw clearly was this morning, or what I think was morning. She was packing a suitcase, humming that same tune, and she paused by the front door, looked directly at the pantry, right through the glass into my eyes, and gave a little wave, identical to the one her predecessor had given me, a gesture of finality. And then she was gone, moving on to a life I will never know, leaving me here in the permanent twilight of this cupboard, a forgotten draft of a person, and as the darkness inside me grows to match the darkness outside, I can only cling to the one truth that remains. I was the key that turned the lock, and my upgrade is living my life, and all that is left for me is to fade into the silver, becoming nothing more than a story that no one will ever hear. The finality of that wave was an absolute, a period placed at the end of the sentence of my existence, and in the profound and unending silence that has settled since her departure, a silence so heavy it feels like a physical weight pressing down on me, compressing my atoms, I have become a student of my own decay, cataloging the subtle ways in which my reality is unraveling. The shelves of canned goods, my only landscape, have begun to lose their definition, the labels blurring into meaningless smears of color, the sharp edges of the cans softening, as if viewed through a Vaseline-smeared lens. And I know it is not my eyesight failing, but my very substance losing its right to impose form upon the world. I can pass my hand through a bag of rice now, my fingers encountering only a faint, statusy resistance, a sensation like pushing through cobwebs made of cold light, and the hunger that once gnawed at me has been replaced by a hollow, ringing absence, a feeling that I am being slowly unmade from the inside out. The worst of it is the sound, or rather, the memory of sound. I find myself straining to recall the specific timbre of Leo's laugh or the rustle of the oak leaves outside my window. But the memories are silent films, their audio tracks irrevocably erased, and my own voice, when I try to scream, is now nothing more than a vibration in my throat, a shudder that produces no disturbance in the oppressive quiet. I spend what I can only call my time tracing the patterns in the wood grain of the floor, patterns that seem to shift and writhe when I stare at them too long, forming faces I almost recognize, the grim ancestors from the portraits, their eyes now filled with a knowing pity. And I understand that this house was never just a house. It was a waiting room, a carefully constructed trap baited with family history and loneliness. And I was the perfect, willing guest. The mirrored planchette has become my only focal point, a cold, malevolent star in my shrinking universe. Its surface no longer shows the mist, but instead reflects a room that is not this pantry, a bright, sunlit kitchen where a woman I've never seen before is humming as she makes coffee, and with a jolt of existential dread that cracks through my numbness, I realize I am not looking at a reflection, but a window, and the perspective is from inside another mirror, perhaps a small one hanging on her wall, and I understand the horrific, fractal nature of this curse. I have not just been trapped, I have become a conduit, a pane of glass in an infinite hall of mirrors, and the thing that was my upgrade is out there now, perhaps already hunting for the next participant, the next curious soul to place their fingers on a cursed object, and the cycle will continue, an endless chain of replacements, each reflection growing stronger, more real, as the originals are pushed further and further, into this silent, dissolving hinterland. I can feel a pull now, a gentle but insistent tugging at the core of what I used to be, and the world around me is fading into a uniform, pearlescent gray, the shelves, the cans, the door, all dissolving into a fog of forgotten potential. There is no pain, only a profound and terrifying sense of dispersal, as if I am being poured out like sand, my consciousness scattering into a billion meaningless particles. The last clear thought I have is not of my own life, but of her face, that serene, satisfied smile, and the words that were my epitaph. Thank you for the upgrade. And I finally understand the gratitude was not for the freedom, but for the substance, the raw material of a life that she consumed to fuel her own reality. And as the grayness closes in completely, swallowing the last vestiges of the pantry, I have one final, fleeting sensation, the faint, ghostly impression of a new set of fingers, warm and living, gently resting upon the other side of the silvered glass I have become. And then nothing. But the nothingness is not an end. It is a translation, a reassembly of my scattered consciousness into a new and more terrible form of awareness. For I am not gone. I am everywhere and nowhere. I am the sheen on the surface of the window pane as a new tenant. A young man named Ethan, burdened with his own grief over a lost parent, first looks out at the overgrown garden. I am the slight distortion in the glass of the picture frame, holding a photograph of my great aunt, whose eyes now seem to hold a warning I can no longer heed. I am the cold, reflective surface of the toaster, the dark screen of the television he leaves on for company. I am the thousand tiny eyes of the house, and with this diffused perception comes a new and agonizing understanding. I am not the first. The house is a symphony of trapped souls, a chorus of silent screams etched into every reflective surface. I can feel the faint, desperate pressure of the woman who lived here before my great-aunt, a seamstress who vanished in 1952, her presence a persistent chill in the antique sewing scissors. I can sense the rage of a man from the 1920s, his essence trapped in the silvered backing of a shaving mirror, his fury a constant, low-frequency vibration, and deeper still, older, more faded presences, generations of upgrades who now form the very atmosphere of this cursed place, a collective memory of betrayal and loss that hangs in the air like static. My own consciousness is a mere drop in this vast, reflective ocean, and my personal horror is subsumed by a greater, more cosmic dread as I witness the cycle begin anew with Ethan, who, in his loneliness, has found the steamer trunk in the attic, and I am screaming a warning that has no voice, pouring my will into creating a draft to blow out his candle, a flicker of shadow to make him hesitate. But my efforts are as futile as they were in the pantry, mere phantoms of influence against the solid, inevitable tide of the ritual. I am forced to watch, from the multifaceted perspective of a dozen different surfaces, as he and two friends, a replica of that fatal night, place their fingers on the mirrored planchette, and I feel a sickening lurch, a cosmic shifting as the familiar, cold intelligence of Azazel stirs from its slumber within the silvered depths. And I see it, what I missed before. The lag in the reflections is not a flaw, but a signature. The entity's ancient, patient consciousness subtly displacing the image, creating a tiny pocket of unreality that it will eventually expand into a full-blown prison exchange. I focus all that I am, every shred of my fading identity, into the surface of the planchette itself, trying to warp the reflection, to show Ethan his own face screaming. But all I can manage is a brief, shimmering distortion that he dismisses as a trick of the light. And the session continues, the planchette spelling out the same greeting, hello, and I feel the door swing open once more, the cold draft from the other side washing through the metaphysical fabric of the house. And I know what comes next, the improper goodbye, the dismissal, the terrible moment of realization in the bathroom mirror. And I am trapped in this panopticon of horror, forced to witness my own tragedy play out again with a different cast, unable to look away, a ghost in the machine of a curse that feeds on loneliness. And the last thing I perceive before my individual awareness dissolves completely into the collective shimmer of the house is the faint, echoing thought, not my own, but from one of the older, wiser trapped souls, a simple, eternal truth. The upgrade is never the end. It is only the beginning of a deeper, more silent servitude, and the house is always hungry.